When my daughter-in-law told me to leave my own home, I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not ask questions. I smiled, not because I was happy, and not because it didn't hurt, but because, in that moment, something inside me finally woke up. She was standing in the kitchen, her arms crossed, her voice calm and controlled. The kettle was still warm on the stove. The house felt unusually quiet. "This isn't working anymore," she said gently. "I think it would be better if you found another place to live." For a few seconds, I truly thought I had misunderstood her. This was the same house I had helped pay for, the same kitchen where I cooked every day, the same home where I walked carefully, spoke softly, and tried my best not to be a burden. And now, I was being asked to leave as if I was just a guest who had stayed too long. My son was standing behind her. He didn't look at me. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a single word. That silence hurt more than her sentence ever could. Inside my chest, years of memories pressed together, years of sacrifice, years of choosing my child over myself, years of believing that love meant patience even when it felt unfair. I wanted to ask him, "When did you stop seeing me as your mother?" But the words stayed inside. Instead, I smiled, because in that moment, I understood something she did not expect. She thought I was weak because I was old. She thought my kindness meant I had no boundaries. She thought silence meant I had no strength. She thought I would accept this quietly. She was wrong. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The lights were low. The clock ticked slowly, filling the silence. I opened my bank records and stared at one number: $70,000. Money I had saved over many tired years. Money I had given out of love. Money I had trusted them with. As I stared at that number, I made a quiet decision. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. That was the night I stopped shrinking myself to keep others comfortable. That was the night I chose dignity over silence. And that was the night I began to rewrite my life.
My name is Margaret Hale. I am 68 years old. When people hear my age, they often think my story is already finished, as if nothing important can happen anymore, as if life slowly fades into silence. But when I look back, I don't remember silence as emptiness. I remember it as weight. For most of my life, I believed love meant sacrifice, not the loud kind that people notice, but the quiet kind that happens every day without thanks, the kind where you give without keeping score, where you stay quiet to keep peace, where you tell yourself that your feelings can wait. That belief shaped everything I became. I became a mother when I was 23 years old. I was young, unsure, and still trying to understand the world. When my son, Daniel, was born, I remember holding him and feeling two things at once: fear, because I knew I would make mistakes, and purpose, because suddenly someone needed me completely. Back then, life felt simple, not easy, but steady. We lived in a small apartment. The walls were thin, the furniture was old, but it was warm, and it was ours. Daniel's father worked long hours. I stayed home at first, then worked part-time when money became tight. We did not dream of luxury. We dreamed of security, a good school, enough food, a future where worry did not control every day. For a while, it felt possible. Then life changed without warning. When Daniel was 6 years old, his father passed away suddenly. There was no illness to prepare us, no time to say goodbye. One morning, we were eating breakfast together, toast on the table, Daniel talking about school. By the end of that same week, I was standing at a graveside wearing black clothes that did not feel like mine. Daniel's hand was small and tight inside mine. He kept asking when his father would come back. I didn't know how to explain death to a child when I barely understood it myself. From that day on, it was just the two of us. I learned quickly what survival looked like. I took whatever work I could find, cleaning offices late at night when the city was quiet, working in a bakery before sunrise, taking small jobs during the day whenever someone needed help. Some days I slept only a few hours. Some days my body hurt so badly that standing felt heavy. At night, after Daniel fell asleep, I sometimes cried quietly in the bathroom with the tap running, not because I wanted to cry, but because I had nowhere else to put my fear. I never let Daniel see that side of me. To him, I smiled. I stayed calm. I told him everything would be okay, even when I was not sure it would be. Every morning, I packed his lunch carefully. I cut his sandwiches the way he liked. I slipped small notes inside. "Mom loves you. Have a good day. I'm proud of you." Every evening, I helped him with homework, even when my eyes could barely stay open. When he had nightmares, I sat beside his bed until his breathing slowed. I brushed his hair back and told him he was safe. After he fell asleep, I often sat alone in the living room. The house felt too quiet. I wondered who I was becoming, a woman who lived only for someone else, a woman who stopped asking what she wanted. But I always returned to the same thought. This is what mothers do. I did not remarry. I did not date. People sometimes asked me why. "Don't you get lonely?" they would say. I always smiled and answered, "I have my son." And it was true. My life became small. School schedules, meal times, laundry, bedtime routines. But my love for Daniel filled every corner of it. Daniel grew into a gentle boy, quiet, respectful. Teachers praised him, neighbors admired him. But I noticed something others did not. He avoided conflict. If someone raised their voice, he stayed silent. If something felt uncomfortable, he stepped back. I worried about that quietly. I wondered if the world would be kind to someone so soft. Still, I told myself kindness was not weakness. I hoped it would protect him. When Daniel became an adult, he moved out. I stayed in my small apartment. For the first time in many years, the silence felt different. Not peaceful, just empty. I learned how to live alone again. I worked. I saved money slowly. I did not spend much. I told myself one day it might help Daniel. When Daniel met Claire, he was already in his early 30s. He told me about her carefully, as if choosing the right words mattered. "She's confident," he said. "She knows what she wants." I told myself confidence might be good for him, that maybe she would help him speak up. The first time I met Claire, she was polite, very controlled. She dressed neatly. She spoke clearly. She shook my hand firmly. "I've heard a lot about you," she said. Her smile did not quite reach her eyes. I noticed it, but I ignored the feeling. I wanted peace. I wanted my son to be happy. Their wedding was small and simple. I cried quietly during the ceremony, not from sadness, but from pride. I believed my long years of sacrifice had led to this moment. My son was grown. He had his own family. I thought my hardest years were finally behind me. After the wedding, Daniel came to me with a suggestion. "Mom," he said gently, "why don't you move in with us for a while?" He said it would make sense financially. He said it would be easier for everyone. Claire agreed. "At your age, it's safer," she said, and you won't be alone. I sold my apartment. I packed decades of memories into boxes. Photographs, letters, small objects that carried my whole life. I also gave them $70,000 toward their home, money saved slowly over many tired years. At the time, I believed this was love. As the weeks passed in that house, I began to notice how carefully I measured myself. I listened before I spoke. I watched where I walked. I thought twice before opening a cupboard or turning on a light. I told myself it was normal, that every shared home required adjustment, that I was older now, and flexibility was a kindness. Still, there were moments that stayed with me. Mornings when I woke early and sat quietly at the kitchen table, waiting until I was sure no one else needed the space. Evenings when I carried my tea back to my room because it felt easier to not be seen. Sometimes I would hear Daniel and Claire laughing together in the next room. Their voices were light, carefree. I would smile to myself and think, this is what I wanted for him. But there were other moments too. Moments when Claire corrected me in front of Daniel. Not harshly, not loudly, just enough to remind me where I stood. "Oh, we usually don't do it that way," she would say. Or, "Daniel prefers this instead." Daniel never disagreed. He never defended me. He would just nod, distracted, as if these moments were too small to notice. I told myself not to be sensitive. I told myself this was part of living together. But slowly, a quiet distance grew. I stopped offering opinions. I stopped suggesting things. I stopped asking questions. I learned which parts of myself were welcome and which parts were better kept hidden. At night, lying in my room, I sometimes stared at the ceiling and wondered how a home could feel so full and yet so empty at the same time. I thought about the apartment I had sold, the quiet evenings there, the small freedoms I had not realized I was giving up. But then guilt would follow. "This is your son," I told myself. "This is family." So I stayed quiet. I stayed helpful. I stayed invisible. I believed that if I tried harder, if I asked for less, if I became smaller, everything would settle. I believed that love meant endurance. I did not understand yet that love without respect slowly erases you. At that time, I still believed patience would save me, that time would soften things, that my place in that house would somehow become secure. I did not know then that I was standing at the very beginning of the moment that would change everything.
At first, I told myself I was imagining things. That happens when you get older. At least, that is what people like to say. You're being sensitive. You're overthinking. You should be grateful. So I repeated those words to myself every time something felt wrong. I told myself that living together always takes time, that everyone needs adjustment, that I was the one who needed to bend a little more. After all, this was my son's home now. I was just a part of it. The changes did not arrive all at once. They came quietly, so quietly that I almost missed them. Claire started organizing the house differently. At first, it seemed harmless. She moved dishes. She rearranged cabinets. Then, one morning, I reached for a mug I always used and found it gone. "Oh," she said casually, "I moved your things to the lower cabinet." I nodded. Of course. It was easier than asking why. Meal times changed too. I used to cook dinner every evening. It made me feel useful. But one night, Claire said, "We're trying to eat lighter now." Another time, "We already ordered food." Slowly, my cooking stopped being needed. The kitchen became quieter, colder. I began eating alone more often. Daniel noticed nothing. Or if he did, he never said anything. He came home tired, he sat with his phone, he nodded when Claire spoke. Sometimes I looked at him and searched his face for my son, the little boy who once held my hand so tightly at his father's funeral. But that boy seemed far away now. Claire began correcting me more often. Not angrily, not loudly, just calmly. Daniel prefers his shirts folded this way. We usually lock the door by 9. We don't leave the lights on during the day. Every correction was small, but together they felt heavy, like stones added one by one to my chest. I started apologizing more. Sorry, I didn't know. Sorry, I forgot. Sorry, I won't do it again. Sometimes I didn't even know what I was apologizing for. It became a habit. One afternoon, I overheard Claire on the phone. She was in the living room. She didn't know I was nearby. "It's just hard," she said quietly. "I feel like I can't relax in my own house." My heart tightened. I stood still, holding a dishcloth in my hands. "I didn't sign up for this," she continued. "No, Daniel doesn't see it, but I do." She laughed softly. I know. Something has to change." That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying her words in my mind. My own house. Something has to change. I wondered if I was the something. The next morning, I tried harder. I woke earlier, I cleaned more, I spoke less. I stayed in my room unless necessary. I told myself this was temporary, that patience would fix it. But patience did not fix it. It only made me smaller. Claire began making decisions without me. Family plans, holidays, even small things. "We're going out tonight," she would say. "There's leftovers for you." She never asked if I wanted to come. Daniel never noticed. One evening, I tried to talk to my son, just the two of us in the kitchen. "Daniel," I said gently, "do you think everything is okay?" He sighed. "Mom, please don't start." I froze. "I just wanted to ask." "Claire's stressed," he said. "Let's not make things harder." Something cracked inside me then, because I realized I was the thing that made things harder. After that, I stopped trying. I stopped sharing feelings. I stopped asking questions. I began counting days instead of moments. Money became another quiet tension. Bills arrived. Repairs were discussed. Claire often reminded me how expensive everything was. "This house costs a lot," she said once. "Property taxes alone are high." I nodded. I remembered the $70,000 I had given without hesitation. She never mentioned it. Daniel never mentioned it. It was as if it had never existed. One afternoon, I overheard an argument. Claire's voice was tight. "I need space, Daniel. I can't live like this forever." Daniel replied softly, "She's my mother." There was a pause. "And this is my life," Claire said. That sentence stayed with me. My chest felt hollow. After that, Claire became distant, colder. She stopped pretending. She spoke to me less, looked at me less. I felt like furniture, something placed in a corner. One day I came home from the store and found my belongings moved. My chair, my small table. "Oh," Claire said, "we needed more room in here." I nodded. Where else could I put them? That night I cried silently into my pillow. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, because I did not want anyone to hear. The worst part was Daniel's silence. He saw everything, and still said nothing. Weeks passed like this. Each day a little heavier. Each day I felt less like a mother and more like a problem. Then came the comments. "You're home a lot. You should get out more. Have you thought about other living options?" Each one landed softly, but they landed. One afternoon, Claire sat across from me. She folded her hands carefully. "I think we need to talk," she said. My heart sank. "We both know this isn't ideal," she continued. "I need my space. My marriage needs space." Daniel stood behind her, silent, again. I looked at my son. He did not look back. In that moment, I understood something painful. Silence can be louder than words. I nodded slowly. "I understand," I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded calm. Inside, I was shaking. That night, I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed and stared at my hands. Hands that had worked for decades. Hands that had raised a child alone. Hands that had given everything, and now had nowhere to rest. I thought about my apartment, the one I had sold, the quiet evenings, the small freedom. I thought about the money, the $70,000. I had given it with love, but love had not protected me. Something inside me began to change, not loudly, not suddenly, but firmly. I realized I had been shrinking for too long, and I was tired. That night, while the house slept, I sat at the kitchen table once more, the same table where I had been told this was no longer working. I opened my bank records. I looked at the numbers slowly, and for the first time in months, I did not feel confused. I felt clear. That clarity scared me, because clarity means change, and change was coming. After that night, something changed in the air of the house. Nothing was said out loud, no doors were slammed, no voices were raised, but the space around me felt tighter. Claire stopped speaking to me unless it was necessary. Her words became short, practical. "Dinner's in the fridge. We're leaving early tomorrow. The door locks automatically." Daniel followed her lead. He was polite, but distant. He asked how my day was, but never waited for the answer. I realized then that politeness can be another form of silence. I began to notice how often I was alone in a house full of people. Mornings passed without conversation, evenings passed without eye contact. Sometimes I would hear them planning things in the other room, trips, weekends away, dinner with friends. I was never included, never mentioned, not even as an afterthought. One morning, I tried to make breakfast the way I always had: toast, eggs, simple. Claire walked in and paused. "Oh," she said, looking at the stove. I was going to use the kitchen. I stepped back immediately. "Of course," I said. I turned off the stove and carried my plate to my room. I ate alone on the edge of my bed, the food already cold. I told myself this was temporary. Everything in life is temporary, I thought. Feelings pass, people adjust. I told myself that if I stayed quiet long enough, things would settle. But instead of settling, they hardened. Claire started setting rules, not written ones, unspoken ones. The television volume, the time lights were turned off, when the washing machine could be used. I followed them carefully. I did not want to be a problem. One afternoon, Daniel came home early. I saw an opportunity. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, hoping he would join me. He did. For a moment, it felt like old times. I said softly, "Daniel, do you remember when we used to have tea together every evening?" He smiled briefly. "Yeah," he said, "those were different times." The way he said it made my chest ache. Different, as if that life belonged to another woman. I wanted to ask him something then, something important, but Claire walked in and the moment closed. As weeks passed, my body began to feel the strain. I slept less, I ate less, not because food wasn't there, but because I did not feel welcome. My room became my refuge, the only place where I could breathe fully. Sometimes I would sit by the window and watch the street. People walked by with groceries, children laughed, life went on. I felt stuck inside a moment that refused to move. The comments continued, always gentle, always polite. You're home a lot. You should get more fresh air. Have you thought about joining a senior group? Each sentence sounded caring, but they all pointed in the same direction. Away. One evening, I heard Claire and Daniel arguing again. Their voices were low, controlled, but I could hear my name. I can't do this anymore, Claire said. I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Daniel sighed. She's my mother. And I'm your wife, Claire replied. I deserve a life too. There was silence after that. Long silence. I waited for Daniel to say something else. He didn't. That silence confirmed what I already knew. I was no longer his priority. The next day, Claire was unusually kind. She asked if I needed anything from the store. She smiled. It felt rehearsed, like someone preparing for a difficult conversation. A few days later, she sat across from me again. Her posture was straight, her hands folded neatly. I've been thinking, and I believe we all need to be honest. My heart began to pound. This situation, she continued, isn't healthy for anyone. I nodded slowly. I understand, I said. Daniel stood nearby, silent, again. After that conversation, things moved quickly. Claire began looking at listings on her phone. I saw the screen once. Senior apartments, shared housing. I said nothing. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. Every sound felt unfamiliar. I thought about my life, the years of work, the years of sacrifice. I thought about the money, $70,000. I had handed it over with trust, no contract, no conditions, just love. And now I was being gently pushed aside. I realized then that silence had not protected me, it had erased me. The next morning I woke with a strange feeling. Not fear, not sadness. Clarity. I began to notice details differently. The way Claire avoided my eyes, the way Daniel hesitated before speaking to me, the way the house no longer felt like a home. I went through my old papers that afternoon, bank statements, receipts. My hands trembled slightly as I looked at the numbers, not because I was angry, but because I finally saw the truth. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again, the same table where I had eaten alone, the same table where difficult conversations happened. I did not cry, I did not feel weak. I felt steady. For the first time in a long while, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What do I deserve? The answer came quietly. Respect, dignity, a place where I am not invisible. That realization did not bring peace. It brought resolve. I knew then that something had to change. Not tomorrow, not someday, soon. And that knowledge followed me into the night. Calm, heavy, unavoidable. The morning everything finally shifted did not begin dramatically. There was no argument, no raised voice, no slammed door. It began like every other morning in that house. Quiet. I woke before sunrise, as I always did. Old habits do not disappear easily. The house was still asleep. The hallway lights were off. The air felt cool and heavy. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long moment, listening to the silence. It no longer felt peaceful. It felt final. I went to the kitchen and made tea. The kettle whistled softly. I poured the water slowly, watching the steam rise. As I sat at the table, holding the warm cup in my hands, I realized something simple and frightening. I was no longer afraid. Not afraid of being alone. Not afraid of disappointing anyone. Not afraid of change. That surprised me, because fear had guided me for a long time. I thought about my life, Not just the recent months, but all of it. The years of work, the years of sacrifice, the years of choosing silence. I thought about Daniel as a child, his small hand in mine, his trust. And I thought about the woman I had become. Quiet, careful, invisible. Something inside me refused that picture now. When Claire came into the kitchen later that morning, she looked surprised to see me there. "You're up early," she said. I nodded. I didn't sleep well. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. There was a pause, the kind that carries meaning. "I've been thinking," she said finally. I looked at her calmly. "So have I replied. She hesitated. "I think we need to talk later today," she said, "when Daniel is home." I nodded again. "That's fine." My voice sounded steady, even to my own ears. The hours that followed felt strange. Time moved slowly, deliberately. I folded my clothes carefully. I organized my papers. I found documents I had not looked at in years. Bank statements, old receipts, the envelope with the transfer confirmation. $70,000. I sat on the bed and stared at that number, not with regret, not with anger, with clarity. That money was not just money, it was years of my life. Late nights, early mornings, a body pushed past exhaustion. I had given it freely, out of love, but love did not mean surrender. When Daniel came home that evening, Claire was already waiting. She had set the table neatly, 3 chairs. It felt formal, intentional. Daniel looked tired, confused. "What's going on?" he asked. Claire gestured for him to sit. "We need to talk," she said. I sat down slowly. My heart was calm. That surprised me too. Claire folded her hands. "I've tried," she began. "I really have." Daniel glanced at me, then back at her. "But this situation," she continued, "isn't healthy." I stayed silent. "I don't feel like this is my home anymore," she said. "I feel tense all the time." Daniel sighed. "Claire," she raised her hand gently. "No, please, let me finish." She turned to me. "I respect you," she said, "but I need my space." I nodded. "I understand," I said quietly. Daniel looked relieved. "I think it would be best," Claire continued, "if you found another place to live." The words hung in the air. This was the moment, the one I had been expecting. Daniel finally looked at me. "Mom," he said softly. I met his eyes. "Yes?" He swallowed. "I just think maybe this would be easier for everyone." That sentence hurt more than anything else he had ever said, because it told me where I stood. I took a slow breath. "I agree," I said. Both of them froze. They had not expected that. Claire blinked. "Oh," she said. "Yes," I repeated. "I agree." Daniel frowned. "You do?" I nodded. "I think it's time." There was a long silence. Claire shifted uncomfortably. "Well," she said, "I'm glad we're on the same page." I placed my hands flat on the table. "But," I continued gently, "there is something we need to talk about first." Daniel tensed. "What do you mean?" I looked at him calmly. "The house," I said, "and the money." Claire's expression tightened. "What money?" she asked. I looked directly at her. "The $70,000 I gave," I said. Daniel stiffened. "That was years ago," he said quickly. "Yes," I replied, "and it still matters." Claire crossed her arms. "That was a gift," she said. I nodded. "It was," I said. "A gift given in trust." I paused. "And that trust is gone." Daniel shook his head. "Mom, please." "No," I said softly. "Please let me finish." My voice was calm, but firm. "I gave that money because I believed I was building a family," I said. "I believed I had a place here. I no longer do." I looked around the room. I no longer do. Claire shifted in her chair. What are you saying? She asked. I met her eyes. I am saying that I will be withdrawing my investment. Daniel's face went pale. You can't, he said. I tilted my head slightly. I already have. The room went silent. Claire's mouth opened slightly. What? She whispered. I met with a lawyer, I said calmly. I reviewed the agreement. Daniel stared at me. You did this without telling us? I nodded. Yes. Claire stood up. This is unbelievable, she said. You're punishing us. I shook my head slowly. No, I replied. I am protecting myself. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Mom, this is too much, he said. I looked at him. So was everything else, I replied. Claire's voice sharpened. You're ruining our plans. I stayed seated. You made plans without me, I said, without considering what I gave. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know it was this bad, he said. I felt a small ache then, but it passed. You didn't want to know, I replied gently. The argument did not explode. It collapsed, quietly. Claire sat back down slowly. Her confidence was gone. She looked smaller now. So what happens now? She asked. I took a breath. I will be moving out, I said, on my terms. Daniel whispered, I'm sorry. I nodded. I know, I said, but sorry doesn't change everything. That night, I went to my room and packed, slowly, carefully. No tears, just resolve. As I closed the suitcase, I realized something important. I had not lost anything. I had found myself. The next morning, I left quietly. No scene, no goodbye speech, just my bag and my dignity. And as the door closed behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. After I left the house that morning, I did not feel brave. I felt empty. The kind of emptiness that comes after a long illness, when the pain finally stops, but your body does not yet remember how to rest. I walked slowly to the bus stop, my suitcase rolling behind me. Every step felt unfamiliar, not because the street had changed, but because I had. As I sat on the bus, I stared out the window. Houses passed by, trees, people walking their dogs. Life continued, unaware that something important had just ended for me, and something else had just begun. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I did not check it. Not yet. I needed the silence. For once, the silence belonged to me. I thought about the look on Daniel's face when I told him the money was gone. Shock, confusion, a hint of fear. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing comfort. That realization hurt more than his silence ever had. I wondered when exactly my son had stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a background presence, something that was always there until it wasn't. The bus stopped near a small hotel. Nothing fancy, clean, quiet. I checked in with a calm voice that surprised even me. The room was small, one bed, one chair, a window facing the street. But when I closed the door behind me, I felt something loosen inside my chest. I was alone, and for the first time in a long time, that felt safe. I sat on the bed and finally checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Daniel, 2 messages from Claire. I did not open them, not because I was angry, but because I was tired of explaining myself to people who only listened when it affected them. Instead, I called the lawyer again. He answered calmly, as if this was just another ordinary day. I told him I had moved out. He said, "You did the right thing." Those words mattered more than I expected. Later that evening, Daniel finally reached me. His voice sounded small. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm safe," I said. "That's all you need to know right now." There was a long pause. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. I closed my eyes. "That's the problem, Daniel," I replied softly. "You didn't think." He began to cry. Real tears this time. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. I believed him, and still it did not change anything. "I know," I said gently, "but intention doesn't erase impact." After the call ended, I sat quietly. I expected guilt to come. It didn't. Instead, I felt something steadier: resolve. The next few days passed slowly. I found a small rental cottage on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, nothing impressive, but it was mine. When I signed the papers, my hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, from relief. Claire tried calling once. I let it ring. Daniel came by the hotel one afternoon. He looked older, tired. "I should have protected you," he said. I nodded. "Yes," I replied, "you should have." He flinched, but I did not soften the truth. He asked if I would forgive him. I thought carefully before answering. "I will," I said, "but forgiveness does not mean returning to the same place." He nodded slowly. As I moved into my new place, I unpacked slowly. Each item felt lighter than it had before. My clothes, my books, my photographs, pieces of my life that finally belonged only to me again. At night, I slept deeply. No footsteps outside my door, no tension in the air. Just silence, gentle silence. I thought often about the money, not with regret, but with understanding. That $70,000 had not rewritten my life. The decision to stop shrinking had. I realized something important during those quiet nights. Standing up for yourself does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like paperwork, and a calm voice, and a closed door. I did not become a different person. I became myself again. The last time I saw Claire was weeks later. She stood across from me, awkward and restrained. "I didn't think you would actually do it," she said. I smiled gently. "I didn't either," I replied. There was nothing else to say. Some endings do not need explanations. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt the full weight of the turning point. Not the argument, not the money, but the moment I chose myself without apology. That was the true turning point. Not when I left the house, not when I cut the money, but when I stopped believing that my worth depended on staying silent. In the days that followed, I began to understand something I had ignored for years. Loss does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes quietly, wrapped in politeness and careful words. I had not lost my son in one moment. I had lost him slowly, each time he chose comfort over courage. That truth was painful, but it was also freeing, because it meant I could stop blaming myself. I replayed many moments in my mind. The first time Claire corrected me. The first time Daniel stayed silent. The first time I felt like a guest instead of a mother. At the time, I had explained it away. Stress, marriage adjustments, my own age. Now I saw it clearly. I had been convenient, and when convenience ended, so did my place. One evening, sitting alone in my new home, I took out an old photo album, pictures of Daniel as a child, school events, birthday cakes made by hand. I did not cry. I smiled, because I knew I had loved well, and no one could take that from me. I also thought about the money again, not as a loss, but as a boundary. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a clear line, and the world had not ended. There was a quiet pride in that realization, not the kind you show, the kind you feel. A week later, Daniel sent a message. It was long, careful. He said he understood now, that he had been wrong, that he missed me. I read it twice. Then I replied with one sentence. I hope you learn from this. Nothing more. Because sometimes love must step back so growth can step forward. As time passed, the sharpness faded, not into forgiveness yet, but into acceptance. I accepted that my role had changed, that my son was no longer a child, and that I no longer needed to disappear for him. I began to build a routine: morning walks, simple meals, quiet evenings with books and tea, a life that did not require permission. One afternoon, as sunlight filled my small living room, I realized something important. I was not lonely. I was peaceful. The turning point was not just about leaving a house or taking back money. It was about reclaiming myself after years of shrinking. I finally understood this truth. Silence is not strength when it costs you your dignity, and love is not love when it asks you to disappear. That chapter of my life closed quietly. No applause, no victory speech, just a woman standing still in her own space for the first time in years. And that was enough. The first few weeks after I left were quiet in a way I had never known before. Not the heavy silence I had lived with in my son's house, but a softer one. A silence that did not watch me, that did not judge me. I woke up when my body was ready, not when I felt I should. Sometimes the sun was already high. Sometimes it was still early morning. For the first time in years, there was no schedule to obey but my own. My new home was small. One bedroom, one narrow kitchen, a little window that faced the street. It was not impressive, but it was mine. That alone changed how it felt. I unpacked slowly over several days. There was no rush. Each item I placed felt like a quiet decision. This stays. This matters. This belongs with me. At night, I slept deeply. No listening for footsteps, no tension in my shoulders. When I woke, my body felt lighter, as if it had been holding its breath for years and had finally exhaled. Some mornings, grief arrived without warning. Not sharp grief, but dull. It came when I made tea and realized no one would criticize how I did it. It came when I folded laundry and remembered how carefully I used to do it. Those memories did not hurt the way they once had. They simply reminded me how much of myself I had given away. Daniel called a few times. At first, I did not answer, not to punish him, but because I needed space to hear my own thoughts. Eventually, I picked up. His voice sounded different, quieter. "Mom," he said, "I don't know how to fix this." I did not rush to comfort him. "You can't fix it," I replied calmly, "but you can learn from it." There was silence on the line. "I miss you," he said. I believed him, and still I did not go back. Forgiveness, I learned, does not always returning. Sometimes it means letting go without reopening the door. I began walking every morning, nothing fast, just around the block. I noticed things I had ignored for years: the sound of birds, the way sunlight hit the pavement. Life felt slower, kinder. One afternoon, I sat at my small table and wrote a list, not of regrets, but of truths. I wrote, I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to say no. I am allowed to change my mind. I am allowed to protect myself. I folded the paper and kept it in a drawer. I did not need to read it every day. I just needed to know it existed. Money stopped being a source of fear, not because I had more of it, but because I had control again. I budgeted carefully. Simply, I had lived with less before. I knew how. What I had gained was worth more. Peace. Weeks turned into months. The sharpness of the pain softened. I still loved my son. That did not change. But I no longer confused love with self-erasure. One day, Daniel came to see me. He stood in my doorway, unsure. The room was quiet. "This is nice," he said. I smiled gently. "It's enough," I replied. He looked around, then at me. "I didn't realize how unhappy you were," he said. "I told you," I answered softly. "You just couldn't hear me then." He nodded. No excuses this time. Claire never came, and that was okay. Not every story needs closure from both sides. As time passed, I found myself laughing again, at small things, at memories. The laughter felt lighter, not forced. One evening, I cooked a meal the way I liked it. No one corrected me, no one complained. I sat at the table alone and felt completely full. I thought often about the woman I had been, the one who stayed quiet, who apologized too much. I did not judge her. She did what she thought love required, but I no longer needed to be her. People sometimes ask me if I regret cutting the money. I shake my head. Money can be replaced, time cannot, and dignity, once reclaimed, is priceless. I learned that strength does not always look bold. Sometimes it looks like walking away calmly, like choosing peace over approval, like closing a door gently. As my life settled into its new shape, I felt something unexpected, gratitude, not for what happened, but for what it taught me. I am still a mother. That part of me will never disappear. But I am also a woman who deserves respect, and I finally understand that those two truths can exist together. I no longer wait to be invited into my own life. I am already here. Claire remained distant, and that too was something I accepted. Not every relationship needs repair. Some only need release. As months passed, I noticed how my body changed. My shoulders relaxed. My sleep deepened. I smiled more often, not because life was perfect, but because it was honest. One morning, while walking around the block, I passed a woman about my age. She smiled at me. I smiled back. A simple exchange, and yet it reminded me that connection does not have to hurt. I thought often about other women like me, women who stay quiet to keep peace, women who believe endurance is love. I wished I could sit beside them and tell them gently, "You are allowed to choose yourself." I realized something else, too. Age does not weaken you. It clarifies you. You stop pretending. You stop waiting. You finally see what matters. There were days when I felt proud of myself. Not loudly, not in a way that needed validation, just a quiet pride, the kind that settles in your chest and stays. One evening, Daniel visited again. He brought tea. We sat together in my small living room. "This place feels calm," he said. I nodded. "It's because no one is shrinking here," I replied. He looked at me for a long moment. "I'm glad you chose yourself," he said. So was I. I no longer measured my worth by how needed I was. I measured it by how whole I felt. The money became just money again. What it gave me was not freedom. Freedom came from the decision itself. I understood now that rewriting your life does not require anger. It requires clarity and courage. Most of all, it requires one simple belief, that you matter, even when you are quiet. I did not become younger, I did not become richer, but I became something far more important. I became present in my own life. And that was the true resolution. Not revenge, not victory, but peace. As the months continued, I noticed that my memories no longer arrived with the same weight. They still came, but they no longer sat on my chest. They passed through me, like clouds moving slowly across the sky. I could remember my old life without feeling trapped inside it. That felt like progress. I began to understand how deeply I had tied my identity to being needed. For years, my value had come from what I gave, what I fixed, what I endured. Without those roles, I had once feared I would disappear, but instead, I became clearer. I learned to sit with myself without distraction. No television, no phone, just quiet. At first, that quiet felt uncomfortable. Then it felt honest. And eventually, it felt kind. Some evenings, I spoke out loud to no one, not because I was lonely, but because hearing my own voice felt grounding. I would say simple things. I am safe. I am enough. I did the best I could. Those words mattered. Daniel and I found a new rhythm, not the closeness of childhood, not the distance of hurt, something careful in between. We met for tea sometimes, in public places. He listened more than he spoke. I did not rush to fill silences anymore. One day, he asked me something unexpected. "Were you ever happy when you lived with us?" I thought for a long moment. I was hopeful, I answered honestly, but hope isn't the same as happiness. He nodded. That was enough. I stopped explaining my choices to people. Some friends asked questions. "Don't you miss them? Wasn't it lonely leaving?" I answered gently. I didn't leave to escape them. I left to return to myself. That usually ended the conversation. I also began to notice how my body responded to peace. My hands stopped shaking, my jaw unclenched. I breathed more deeply. I had not realized how tense I had been until the tension was gone. One afternoon, while sorting old papers, I found a note Daniel had written me as a child. It said, "Thank you for always taking care of me." I held it for a long time, and then I placed it back carefully. That chapter was complete. It did not need rewriting. I no longer replayed arguments in my mind. I no longer imagined saying the perfect thing. The past stopped demanding my attention. I realized something else, too. I had not failed as a mother. I had simply raised a human being who made his own choices, and those choices were not a reflection of my worth. As my confidence grew, so did my compassion, even for Claire. Not understanding, not approval, just acceptance. She had acted from fear, too. That did not excuse her, but it freed me from carrying resentment. I started volunteering once a week. Nothing demanding, just reading to children at the local library. Their voices were bright, uncomplicated. They reminded me that care can be gentle without being self-sacrificing. Some nights I still felt an ache, not for the house, not for the money, but for the version of myself who believed silence was love. I held that woman kindly in my thoughts. She had survived with the tools she had. Now I had better ones. I no longer rushed through days. I let them unfold. Morning light, Afternoon shadows, evening calm. Time stopped feeling like something I was losing. It felt like something I was living. One quiet morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older, lines around my eyes, silver in my hair, but my expression was softer, more settled. I smiled at myself, not because everything was perfect, but because I was present. I finally understood that resolution does not mean everything makes sense. It means you stop fighting reality. You stop wishing the past was different, and you start living where you are. I had not rewritten my life with anger. I had rewritten it with honesty, with boundaries, with calm courage, and most importantly, with respect for myself. That was the true healing. Not the house I left, not the money I reclaimed, but the woman I became when I stopped shrinking. I did not need to prove anything anymore. I was already home. Today, when I look back on everything that happened, I no longer feel the sharp pain I once carried. What I feel now is understanding. Not the kind that excuses hurt, but the kind that allows you to breathe again. For a long time, I believed that love meant staying quiet, that if I endured enough, if I asked for little enough, I would earn my place. I believed that being needed was the same as being loved. I was wrong. Love does not ask you to disappear. Love does not grow stronger when one person keeps shrinking. And silence, I learned, is not always strength. Sometimes silence is just fear wearing a calm face. I used to think rewriting your life required big courage, loud courage, arguments, confrontation, dramatic goodbyes. But I was wrong about that too. Rewriting your life can be quiet. It can look like paperwork, a packed suitcase, a calm voice that says, I choose myself. No shouting, no revenge, just dignity. I am still a mother. That part of me will never fade. I still worry, I still hope, I still love, but I am no longer willing to lose myself in the process. Because love that costs you your peace is not love worth keeping. Some people believe that getting older means becoming weaker. I have learned the opposite. Age does not weaken you, it removes illusions. You stop pretending, you stop waiting for permission, you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to listen. You finally see what matters. If there is one thing I wish someone had told me earlier, it is this. You are allowed to take up space, even in your family, even in your old age, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Especially then. I did not win anything by walking away. I gained something far better. Peace. The kind that settles into your bones. The kind that lets you sleep at night. The kind that does not depend on approval. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I regret leaving. If I regret taking the money back. If I regret choosing myself. I always answer the same way. No, because regret comes from knowing you could have acted differently, and I know now that I acted exactly as I needed to. I no longer measure my worth by how useful I am to others, or how much I give, or how quietly I endure. I measure it by how whole I feel when I am alone, and for the first time in my life, that feeling is steady. If you are listening to my story right now and you feel that familiar tightness in your chest, the one that whispers, maybe I should just stay quiet, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not too old to choose yourself. You are not selfish for wanting peace. You are not wrong for setting boundaries. It is not too late. It is never too late. I did not rewrite my life in one day. I rewrote it in small, quiet choices, and each one brought me closer to the woman I had always been underneath the silence. Thank you for watching. Your trust, your time, and your support truly mean everything. If this video brought you value, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel reach those who need it most. Stay focused, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next video.